Welcome to Lecture 2, Part C, where we're going to map the process. Now again, if we look at the laser pointer here, we've defined the opportunity, we've identified goals, we've surveyed the customer, so we can either talk to the customer or do some software analysis, Poll Daddy software, I'll put the link up. We've defined the critical to quality customer requirements. And now we're on to, I suppose, the third step in the define phase, which is mapping the process. And this is probably one of the most important steps. And we're going to talk about flowcharting and value stream mapping. So the key really here is that we have to specify value from the standpoint of the end customer. And we're going to look at how your current products or services maybe don't meet your customers' value expectations. That could be because the price is too high, the quality is poor, delivery times are late always, or they may have changing requirements and you're just not flexible enough. You can't respond to their changing needs. One of the easiest tools we can use to map the process is a flowchart. Now the flowchart, you see here, it's basically a pictorial display of a sequence of events that make up a process. So you can describe the order of events, you can describe any interactions in the process, like decisions here, maybe yes, no. If something happens, yes, it goes on to process step 2. Maybe it passes. If it fails, then it has to go back and be reworked in process step 1. You can use it to design a new process, document an existing process, or identify problem areas in a particular process. An example of a flowchart, which I've taken here from the National Health Service in the UK, is a spaghetti diagram. Spaghetti diagrams, they're used in conjunction with other tools and techniques, but you can see they're done by hand. So you draw what's called a plan view of your lab or of your department or of a waiting room on a hospital. You build up a visual picture of maybe people flow or patient flow, staff flow. You could use different color lines, and then you can go back in and identify the wasted movement. So a very simple tool, and you can use it to make changes in the layout of the department to improve your efficiency. So the whole team should be involved in this development and discussions around the drawing the spaghetti diagram. Usually this is done in a big chart in one of your meeting rooms. The staff then can contribute to the exercise and what changes need to be made. Now in particular we're going to look at the automated assembly cell process, which we looked at in an earlier lecture, but just to give you an example again, we're building this device here. It's a executive pen holder. It's got a number of different process steps, which you can see here on the right. So it comes out of this storage package area, goes into a lathe, goes into by robot, is transferred to a milling machine, then goes for some assembly, and then it goes for some inspection and then back into the storage area. What we're going to do is we're going to draw a value stream map of this process. So it's a paper and pencil representation of every process in the material information flow to build this executive pen holder. So I've just drawn an overlay here and some of the symbols we're using for value stream mapping. We can see here the material flow, we can see the stations, identify the robot, the lathe, the inspection, so on. But we have other symbols as well, which I've given you a link to on Moodle. Basically, you're trying to get an idea of the overall production process, both of value add and non-value add creating activities. Within lean mapping, there are also 5 stages. So you can see here we're trying to identify the value from the viewpoint of the end customer. So you can do this for each product family, and you're really trying to understand how to make that product flow. It could be a transaction, it could be a document, it could be a form, it could be a patient in a hospital, it could be a customer like in the airport, passengers moving through the airport. But what we're going to really look at is this area here, mapping the value stream. And we then can identify the waste and eliminate it. So the finished value stream map is this. We're going to go through this in a lot more detail. What we're using symbols for different process steps, for different material flow, different information flow, where the inventory and where the stock is. So we're going to map this out by hand and then come back and discuss it. So it's recommended when you're doing a value stream map that you get a pen and paper and you draw the value stream. And in this case, we're mapping material and information flows. So you can see here we have production control, and they give a monthly forecast to the supplier and also weekly orders. Now we're trying to make this as visual as possible. So we can see here that the supplier ships in the material by truck, and they ship in batches of 250 at a time. The other key thing in a value stream map is that you are the part. You go through the process as if you were the part, and you map each station that the part stops at. So the first station that we stop at is the lathe, and it shows here in the value stream map that we have one person operating the lathe. So as the part comes out of the lathe, then we take the cycle time, the changeover time, and the uptime. The part then goes on from the lathe into the milling machine, and we map that. Then the inventory between the lathe and the milling machine is 250 pieces. So as it comes out then and goes into the milling machine, again we track the number of people, so there's one operator there on the milling machine. And as you can see, we're a little bit of poetic license here. We're just trying to show a value stream map. It doesn't. We don't actually have an operator at each of these steps, but we have cycle time, changeover time, and uptime for those steps as well. The part then comes out of the milling machine, and we track the inventory between the milling machine and the next process step, and there's 350 pieces there. So it then goes on to the robot assembly, and the part is placed onto the robot where we have some assembly steps. Again, we don't have any people here, but we have some symbols which can be used in value streams such as Kanban, and then we show the assembly step. We take the cycle time, the uptime, and the changeover time for the robot. The part then, once that's finished, it goes back onto the conveyor, and we track that onto the next process step. So the inventory between the robot assembly and the final inspection station is 200 pieces. So at the inspection station, again, we show one operator there, and the dial gauge is inspected. If everything's okay, then we take the cycle time of that as 30 seconds, the changeover time is 5 minutes, and the uptime is 99%. So you can see we're gathering data as the part walks through the process or is brought through the process. And we're not taking the data off the information systems, we're actually taking it off what the Japanese say, go to Gemba, go to the factory floor. So finally the part goes back into storage, and there might be some packing operation there. We show one person in that station, and again we track the cycle time, the uptime, and the changeover time. So now that we've shown all the process steps, we continue on with the material flow and the information flows. So after the storage and package area, we have 200 pieces, and it shows that the parts are then shipped. There's a daily shipment, again by truck, and that goes back. This symbol here represents the customer, and then finally the customer will give a monthly forecast back to our factory production control department. So then within the factory we're going to show some information flows. So production control can see the flow of movement of material and information through the factory floor. They give weekly orders to a production supervisor, and then the production supervisor is able to give that information daily to each of the different process steps throughout the factory. So that's the value stream map. It's a very useful process. I've put some information onto Moodle showing you where to find additional details. In particular, the book Learning to See is a good reference. So once we've drawn our current state value stream map, we can then identify a future value stream map. So remember, this is where we are, this is where we want to be, and we're going to use Lean and Six Sigma to get there. So we're using the Lean tools to improve flow, reduce waste. We're using the Six Sigma tools to improve quality and reduce variation. So you can see here that we've reduced the inventory at these steps from 2,500 to 25. We've combined two process steps, eliminated an inspection step because our quality's got better. So the idea is to identify a ideal future state. You may not get there, and then try and drive towards perfection to achieve that. Okay, so we've looked at the objectives, we've looked at the customer critical quality, and we've mapped the process. The last two areas I'm just going to touch on briefly, where you put your project charter together, and I'll talk about that. And sometimes there's this A3 process that the large companies, automotive companies use, and actually large companies now, I know in Ireland, are using it. Students are using it with their projects, where you document everything on a one-page A3, and that's used to identify the key goals, objectives, metrics within a project. The key objectives then would be put into your project charter, and there's this acronym used called SMART objectives. So the idea is that the objectives are specific, detailed information on the process or the voice of the customer. They should be measurable, so we have a current goal, a future goal, and we may have several metrics in there, such as cycle time, lead time, quality, and so on. They should be achievable or attainable, so it's something within the team's control. So what a lot of companies do now is they do a goal and then maybe a stretch goal or a blue sky. They should be realistic and relevant, so they align with the company's objectives, the voice of the customer, and they should be timely, defined start and expected completion dates. So that's all of the define phase steps. Next lecture we'll move on to the measure phase.